The blistering summer sun reflected off Lake Michigan's surface as I gunned my jet ski across the water, sending a satisfying spray into the air. Freedom pure and simple. After 12 grueling months of negotiations, paperwork, and enough legal jargon to make my head spin, I had finally closed the deal on Harborview Marina. Not just a slip or a storefront, the entire marina, all 28 acres of prime lakefront real estate in Shoreview, Illinois. I hadn't told anyone yet. The closing had happened just yesterday, and I wanted to enjoy one perfect day on the water before the news spread and the responsibilities of ownership came crashing down. Just me, the jet ski I'd owned for years, and the open water. Sir, you need to stop immediately. A shrill voice cut through the engine's roar. I throttled down, letting the jet ski slow to an idle as I turned toward the sound. A harbor patrol boat was approaching, blue lights flashing. Behind the uniformed officer stood a woman in her 50s, her blonde bob perfectly styled despite the wind, designer sunglasses perched on her nose, and an expression of righteous indignation plastered across her face. "Is there a problem, officer?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral despite the annoyance bubbling up inside me. "You're operating that watercraft in a no-wake zone, sir," the officer replied professionally. "I need to see your boating license and registration." I reached into the waterproof compartment and pulled out my documents, handing them over. "I was well outside the buoys marking the no-wake zone, officer." "That's not true," the woman behind him interjected, stepping forward. I watched him from my deck. He was speeding right through the designated area. "I have it on video." The officer turned slightly. "Madam, please let me handle this." I squinted at the woman, recognition dawning. Karren Westlake, the self-appointed queen of the Harborview Estates Homeowners Association. Her lakefront property bordered the marina, and she'd developed quite a reputation among boaters for her complaints. "Isaac Ramirez," the officer read from my license. "Everything appears to be in order, but I still need to issue a citation for the no-wake violation." "Officer Jenkins," I said, reading his name tag, "I'm very familiar with the no-wake boundaries. I was at least 50 yards beyond the markers." "He's lying," Karren interjected again. "I've been watching him race back and forth all morning, disturbing residents who pay good money to live in a peaceful community." The officer looked uncomfortable. "Sir, Miss Westlake filed a formal complaint with video evidence." I bit back a retort. "May I see this video evidence?" Karren triumphantly pulled out her phone and showed a shaky clip that, from its angle, made it impossible to determine where the no-wake markers actually were in relation to my jet ski. "This doesn't show the buoys," I pointed out. "I know exactly where they are," she snapped. "I've lived here for 15 years and I'm the HOA president. Unlike some people, I respect rules and property values." The officer looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Sir, I'm going to have to issue the citation. You can contest it in court if you wish." I took a deep breath, deciding this wasn't the hill to die on. "Fine, officer. I understand you're just doing your job." As he wrote the ticket, Karren leaned forward with a smug smile. "You know, the Harborview Estates HOA has been pushing to ban personal watercraft entirely from this section of the lake. They're noisy, dangerous, and lower our property values. This incident just proves our point." I accepted the citation from Officer Jenkins and tucked it into my waterproof pouch. "Miss Westlake, is it? I think you might be overstepping. The HOA doesn't have jurisdiction over the water." She laughed, a brittle sound that set my teeth on edge. "We have considerable influence with the Harbor Commission, Mr. Ramirez. Perhaps you should find somewhere else to play with your toy." The officer cleared his throat. "That'll be all for now. Please be mindful of the no-wake zones, sir." As they started to pull away, something snapped inside me. The perfect day I'd planned to celebrate my achievement was ruined, and for what? A power trip by an HOA president who thought she owned the water. "Officer Jenkins," I called out. "Before you go, I think there's something miss." Westlake should know. The boat paused. "As of yesterday at 3:42 p.m., I am the sole owner of Harborview Marina and all associated water rights." I pulled out my phone, navigating to the digital copy of the closing documents. "Would you like to see the deed?" The look on Karren's face was worth every penny of the $8.2 million I'd paid for the marina. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "You? What?" she finally managed. "I own the marina now, all of it, including the section of water where we're currently floating." I smiled, trying to keep the smugness out of my voice and failing miserably. "So while I appreciate your concern for the rules, perhaps we should be clear about whose rules apply here." Officer Jenkins examined my documentation, his eyebrows rising slightly. "Congratulations on your purchase, Mr. Ramirez." He handed my phone back. "However, the no-wake ordinances are municipal regulations, not private rules." "Of course," I nodded respectfully. "And I was outside the no-wake zone, but I understand you're doing your job based on the complaint filed." Karren had recovered her voice. "This changes nothing. The HOA will still pursue restrictions on jet skis and other nuisance watercraft. We have the ear of the city council." I smiled pleasantly. "I look forward to attending those meetings, Miss Westlake." As the largest commercial property owner on this section of shoreline, I suspect my voice might carry some weight too. The color drained from her face as the implications set in. I wasn't just some weekend warrior she could bully. I was now a permanent stakeholder with significant influence. "Have a good day, Officer Jenkins," I said, starting my engine again. "Miss Westlake, I'm sure I'll be seeing you around." As I pulled away, keeping well within the speed limit, I could feel Karren's glare burning into my back. I had a feeling this was just the opening skirmish in what would become a protracted war. I hadn't planned on announcing my ownership quite this way, but sometimes plans change. And sometimes, just sometimes, karma arrives at exactly the right moment. 2 weeks passed, and I settled into my new role as marina owner. The previous owner, Arthur Whitman, had been ready to retire after 30 years. He'd built Harborview Marina from a small boat launch into one of Lake Michigan's premier facilities, with 200 slips, a clubhouse, ship store, and repair facility. But in recent years, pressure from the Harborview Estates HOA had worn him down. I'd kept the entire staff on, including the marina manager, Miguel Santos, who had 20 years of experience and knew every inch of the operation. We were in my new office, previously Arthur's, reviewing the books when Miguel brought up the elephant in the room. "So you've met Karren Westlake," he said with a grimace. I laughed. "You could say that. She had me pulled over by Harbor Patrol on my first day as owner." Miguel shook his head. "That woman has been a thorn in our side for years. When the housing development went in 15 years ago, things were fine. Then about 7 years ago, she moved in and within a year became HOA president. Ever since then, it's been one complaint after another." "What kind of complaints?" I asked, leaning back in my chair. "Noise, primarily. The sound of boats, people having fun, music from the clubhouse. Then she started on environmental concerns, worried about fuel spills, claiming we were damaging the shoreline." Miguel rolled his eyes. "Arthur spent thousands on environmental studies proving we were actually exceeding regulations. Let me guess, that wasn't good enough. Nothing ever is. Then it became about parking. HOA members would call tow trucks on our customers if they parked on the street, even though it's public parking. Arthur had to expand our lot, which cost a fortune. I drummed my fingers on the desk. And the city just goes along with whatever the HOA wants, Miguel shrugged. The Harborview Estates residents are wealthy and vocal. They vote in local elections and donate to campaigns. The marina is just one business. Well, that's about to change, I said. I didn't sink my life savings into this place to have it strangled by an overreaching HOA. I should warn you, Miguel added. Karren's husband Richard is a senior partner at Westlake, Brown and Associates, one of the biggest law firms in Chicago. Of course he is, I muttered. Well, good thing I have a few lawyers of my own on speed dial. Our conversation was interrupted by the marina office door bursting open. Karren Westlake strode in, followed by two other women approximately her age, all wearing similar designer casual wear that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. Mr. Ramirez, Karren said, not bothering with pleasantries. We need to talk about your plans for the marina. I stood slowly. Miss Westlake, I don't believe we had an appointment. This is Patricia Holden, our HOA vice president, and Deborah Finch, our secretary, Karren continued as if I hadn't spoken. We've prepared a memorandum of understanding that we expect you to sign regarding operational hours, noise limitations, and aesthetic guidelines for the marina. She thrust a thick document across my desk. I didn't touch it. Miss Westlake, I appreciate your visit, but I'm in the middle of a business meeting. If you'd like to discuss anything related to the marina, I suggest you call and make an appointment like everyone else. Patricia, a redhead with a permanent pinched expression, stepped forward. Mr. Ramirez, perhaps you don't understand. The Harborview Estates HOA has established protocols with the previous owner that have worked effectively for years. Actually, I replied, I've been reviewing the marina's financial records, and I can see exactly how effective those protocols have been in driving down business and increasing unnecessary expenses. Deborah, who at least had the decency to look slightly embarrassed, chimed in. We're simply trying to ensure that our community standards are maintained. Your community ends at your property line, I said firmly. This marina is not part of Harborview Estates. It is not subject to your HOA regulations, covenants, or aesthetic guidelines. Karren's face flushed red. Now you listen here. We have worked too hard establishing Harborview Estates as a premium residential community to have you turn this marina into some kind of waterfront carnival. I felt Miguel tense beside me, but I remained calm. Miss Westlake, I'm going to say this once. I own this marina. I will operate it in compliance with all applicable municipal, state, and federal regulations. I will not, however, be signing any memorandum of understanding with your HOA. Karren leaned forward, her manicured nails digging into my desk. You'll regret taking this position, Mr. Ramirez. The HOA has ways of making life very difficult for businesses that don't cooperate. Is that a threat, Miss Westlake? I asked quietly. It's a promise, she snapped, then turned on her heel. Ladies, we're done here. We'll discuss this at the next board meeting. As they filed out, I called after them. For future reference, appointments can be made through our website. Have a nice day. The door slammed behind them. Miguel let out a long whistle. Well, you've certainly stirred the hornet's nest. I smiled grimly. Something tells me they were already stirred. Now they just know I'm not going to roll over like they're used to. What I didn't know then was just how far Karren Westlake was willing to go to maintain her control over the lakefront, and how dirty this fight was about to get. The first salvo in Karren's campaign came 3 days later. I arrived at the marina to find city inspectors crawling over every inch of the property. What's going on? I asked Wendy Evans, our front desk manager, as I walked into the office. Surprise inspections, she replied with an eye roll. Fire safety, building code, health department, even the liquor board for our clubhouse license. They all showed up within 5 minutes of each other this morning. I spotted Miguel across the yard, speaking with a man in a city jacket. Has this happened before? Never all at once like this, Wendy said, and never without warning. Miguel says Karren Westlake was standing across the street taking pictures when they arrived. Of course she was, I muttered, heading over to join Miguel. The inspector was just finishing up as I approached. Everything looks in order with the fuel system, he was saying. Just make sure those spill containment protocols are posted more prominently. Will do, Miguel replied. Thanks for your time. As the inspector walked away, I raised an eyebrow at Miguel. Coordinated inspections. That seems a bit much. Miguel nodded grimly. Someone with pull made some calls. We keep this place by the book, so I'm not worried, but it's a hassle and bad for business. Customers don't like seeing inspectors everywhere they look. He was right. The normally bustling marina had a subdued atmosphere, with boat owners watching nervously as officials made notes on clipboards. I'm going to make a few calls of my own, I said, pulling out my phone. My first call was to Jason Franklin, a college friend who now worked in the mayor's office as a liaison for business development. After explaining the situation, he promised to look into it. This isn't the first complaint we've had about the Harborview Estates HOA using city resources to pressure neighboring businesses, Jason told me. But they donate heavily to local campaigns, so tread carefully. I don't want special treatment, I assured him. I just want to be treated fairly. My next call was to my attorney, Liam McCarthy, to give him a heads up about the situation. By the end of the day, all the inspectors had left. As predicted, they found only minor issues that were easily addressed. I was reviewing their reports when Wendy buzzed my office. Isaac, there's a Wanda Evans here to see you. Says she's not with the HOA. I frowned, not recognizing the name. Send her in. A moment later, a woman in her early 30s entered my office. Unlike the HOA ladies, she was dressed casually in jeans and a Lake Michigan Sailing Club t-shirt. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. Mr. Ramirez, I'm Wanda Evans. I live in Harborview Estates, but I promise I'm not here on HOA business. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. What can I do for you, Miss Evans? Please call me Wanda. She sat down, looking slightly nervous. I heard about your run-in with Karren and the inspection squad today. I wanted you to know that not everyone in Harborview supports what she's doing. This was unexpected. I appreciate that, Wanda. There's a growing faction within the neighborhood that's tired of Karren's dictatorial approach. She's made living there unbearable for many of us with constant rule changes and selective enforcement. I leaned forward, interested. Go on. I'm actually the former HOA vice president. I resigned last year after Karren pushed through a series of increasingly restrictive regulations without proper board votes. Patricia Holden, who's with her now, was my replacement handpicked by Karren. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Wanda took a deep breath. Because Karren's vendetta against the marina isn't just about noise or aesthetics. There's more to it. I'm listening. 3 years ago, Karren and Richard tried to buy the marina from Arthur Whitman. They wanted to downsize it, significantly reduce the number of slips, eliminate the repair facilities, and turn the clubhouse into a private members-only yacht club for Harborview residents. This was news to me. Arthur never mentioned that. He wouldn't have. He rejected their offer outright, told them he'd never sell to people who would destroy what he built. That's when the HOA pressure really ramped up. I believe Karren's trying to make running this place so difficult that you'll eventually give up and sell to them. I sat back, processing this information. Do you have any proof of this? Wanda shook her head. Nothing concrete, but I have copies of board meeting minutes showing the pattern of escalation against the marina after the rejected offer. And I know others in the neighborhood who would confirm what I'm telling you. Thank you for coming forward, I said sincerely. This helps me understand what I'm up against. There's one more thing, Wanda added, lowering her voice. Karren's planning something for your jet ski rentals. I overheard her on the phone with someone at the city council, talking about noise ordinances and safety concerns. I think she's going to try to get them banned from this section of the lake. My jaw tightened. The jet ski rental program was one of our most profitable services during the summer months. When is this supposed to happen? I asked. The next city council meeting is Tuesday evening. She's gathering HOA members to attend and speak against jet skis. I nodded. I'll be there. Thank you, Wanda. I really appreciate the heads up. As she stood to leave, she hesitated. Mr. Ramirez, be careful. Karren doesn't like to lose and she plays dirty. I learned that the hard way. After Wanda left, I called Miguel back into my office and filled him in on what she had told me. So that's why Arthur was so insistent about vetting potential buyers, Miguel said, realization dawning on his face. He never said why, just that he wouldn't sell to just anyone. Well, now we know, and it explains why Karren was so shocked to see me as the new owner. She probably thought she'd finally worn Arthur down. Miguel looked worried. If what Wanda says is true, they're not going to stop with inspections and complaints. No, I agreed, which means we need to prepare for a fight. The city council meeting on Tuesday evening was packed. I arrived early to find the chamber already filling with Harborview Estates residents, many wearing blue shirts with "Preserve Our Peaceful Waterfront" printed on them. Karren stood at the center of the group, directing people to specific seats like a general positioning troops. I took a seat in the second row, directly in her line of sight. When she spotted me, her eyes narrowed, but she quickly looked away, continuing her preparations. Miguel arrived shortly after, followed by several of our regular customers and a few employees. I'd spread the word about the meeting, asking for support, but tried not to make it seem like we were mobilizing an opposing force. This wasn't about creating deeper divisions. The meeting began with routine city business. I sat patiently through discussions about road repairs and a proposed adjustment to garbage collection schedules. Finally, the mayor announced the open comment period, and Karren was the first to the microphone. Good evening, Mayor Williams and council members, she began in a practiced, polite tone that contrasted sharply with how she'd spoken to me. I'm Karren Westlake, president of the Harborview Estates Homeowners Association, representing over 200 families in our community. She launched into a well-rehearsed speech about noise pollution from jet skis disrupting the peaceful enjoyment of lakefront properties. She presented charts showing decibel readings and claimed that jet skis were causing shoreline erosion, frightening wildlife, and creating safety hazards for swimmers and other boaters. We're asking the council to amend the existing watercraft ordinance to prohibit the use of personal watercraft within 500 yards of residential shorelines between Memorial Day and Labor Day, Karren concluded, to applause from her blue-shirted supporters. Several other Harborview residents followed, each echoing Karren's points with personal anecdotes about disrupted afternoon naps and frightened grandchildren. It was a well-orchestrated presentation. When it was my turn to speak, I approached the microphone calmly. I'd prepared extensively, reviewing regulations and gathering data. Good evening. I'm Isaac Ramirez, the new owner of Harborview Marina. First, I want to thank the council for your service to our community. I understand the concerns raised about noise and safety, and I take them seriously. I paused, making eye contact with each council member. However, I believe the proposed restriction is both unnecessary and potentially harmful to our local economy. Harborview Marina provides jobs for 28 full-time employees and another 15 seasonal workers. Our jet ski rental program alone generates over $200,000 in annual revenue, which translates to significant tax contributions to the city. I presented my own data, showing that our jet ski operations already complied with all state and federal regulations. I pointed out that existing noise ordinances were sufficient if properly enforced, and that a blanket ban would unfairly punish responsible operators. Rather than imposing new restrictions, I propose a collaborative approach, I continued. Harborview Marina is committed to being a good neighbor. We're willing to implement additional measures, such as expanding no-wake zones, establishing dedicated routes for personal watercraft, and enhancing our safety briefings for renters. Several boaters spoke after me, emphasizing the importance of water access for all, not just wealthy homeowners. A local business association representative highlighted the economic impact of the marina on surrounding businesses. The moment that turned the tide, however, came unexpectedly from an elderly gentleman who identified himself as Howard Jenkins, a 30-year resident of Harborview Estates. "I've lived on that shoreline longer than most of you have been on this council," he said, his voice wavering with age but firm with conviction. "When I bought my home, there was a marina there, and I knew what I was getting into. People who move next to airports shouldn't complain about airplane noise, and people who move next to marinas shouldn't complain about boats." He turned to face the audience. "This isn't about noise or safety. This is about a small group trying to privatize a public resource for their exclusive use. Lake Michigan belongs to all of us, not just those who can afford million-dollar homes." The room erupted in applause. Even some blue-shirted residents nodded in agreement. When the council voted, they rejected the proposed ban 4-1. Instead, they established a community advisory committee to review existing regulations and suggest potential modifications, with representatives from both the marina and the HOA. As the meeting adjourned, Karren stormed past me without a word, her face flushed with anger. Richard Westlake, who had been sitting quietly in the back throughout the proceedings, gave me a calculating look before following his wife. I should have recognized it as the look of a man planning his next move. The victory at the city council was short-lived. 3 days later, I arrived at the marina to find a notice from the city's building department taped to our office door. According to the document, an anonymous complaint had been filed alleging that our recent renovation of the clubhouse had been done without proper permits, and the city was issuing a cease and desist order until an inspection could be completed. The renovation in question had been completed over a year ago, long before I purchased the marina. I immediately called Arthur, who confirmed that all proper permits had been obtained and inspections passed. "They're fishing," he said wearily. Karren pulled this same stunt when we renovated the fuel dock. "Check the file cabinet in the storage room. There should be a folder labeled Clubhouse 2024 with all the permits and inspection certificates." I found the folder exactly where he described and called the building department. The clerk sounded surprised when I mentioned I had all the documentation. "That's odd," she said. "The complainant was very specific about the lack of permits. If you can bring those in today, we can lift the order immediately." By mid-afternoon, the cease and desist was rescinded, but the damage was done. We'd had to cancel a private event scheduled in the clubhouse, costing us not only the rental fee but also our reputation with the client. This pattern continued over the next 2 weeks. Anonymous complaints about fuel spills that didn't exist. Calls to the police about noise violations during permitted hours. Reports to the health department about imaginary food safety violations in our small cafe. Each time, we were able to demonstrate compliance, but the constant inspections and disruptions were taking their toll on business and morale. Customers began asking questions, worried about the stability of the marina under new ownership. "She's trying to create the impression that the marina is in trouble since you took over," Miguel observed as we dealt with yet another inspector. "Make people think you don't know what you're doing." He was right, and it was starting to work. Slip reservations for the upcoming holiday weekend were down compared to previous years. The jet ski rental schedule, normally fully booked weeks in advance, had noticeable gaps. I needed to change tactics. Playing defense wasn't working, it was time to go on the offensive. My first step was to hire a private investigator, Terrence Walsh, who specialized in corporate and HOA disputes. His task was simple: dig into the Harborview Estate's HOA's operations, finances, and compliance with state HOA regulations. My second move was more direct. I filed a formal complaint with the city manager about the pattern of seemingly coordinated inspections targeting my business, requesting an investigation into potential misuse of city resources for personal vendettas. Finally, I reached out to Wanda Evans again, asking if she would connect me with other dissatisfied Harborview residents. It was time to build some allies within the HOA itself. Terrence delivered his preliminary findings a week later, and they were more interesting than I'd expected. "The Harborview Estates HOA has been playing fast and loose with their own rules," he explained, sliding a folder across my desk. "For starters, they haven't held a properly noticed election in 3 years. Karren essentially appointed her current board after forcing resignations of anyone who opposed her." "Is that legal?" I asked, flipping through his report. "Not according to Illinois HOA statutes. Elections must be held annually, with proper notice to all members. There's also the matter of their financial disclosures or lack thereof." Terrence pointed to a section of his report detailing the HOA's finances. "They've been collecting special assessments for a community improvement fund, but there's no clear accounting of where that money is going. Over $300,000 has been collected in the past 2 years, but less than $100,000 can be traced to actual improvement projects. Where's the rest?" he shrugged. "That's the question. The HOA's financial statements show it as administrative expenses, but that's unusually high for an association this size." I tapped the folder thoughtfully. "What about conflicts of interest?" "I'm glad you asked." Terrence flipped to another section. "The HOA has paid over $75,000 in legal fees to Westlake, Brown, and Associates in the past year alone. That's Karren's husband's firm, and there's no evidence that they properly disclosed this conflict or sought competitive bids as required by their own bylaws." This was exactly the kind of leverage I needed. "Excellent work, Terrence. Keep digging, I want to know everything." Meanwhile, Wanda had come through with her connections. The following Sunday, I met with a group of 7 Harborview residents in a private room at a restaurant well away from the development. They represented what Wanda called the resistance homeowners, who had grown tired of Karren's increasingly authoritarian rule. "She fined me $500 because my garbage can was visible from the street for more than 4 hours after collection," said Martin Chen, a neurosurgeon who'd lived in Harborview for a decade. "I was in surgery all day. When I appealed the fine, she doubled it for wasting the board's time." Similar stories followed. Arbitrary enforcement of vague rules. approval for home improvements given to Karren's friends while identical requests from others were denied. Assessment, money spent on projects that seemed to primarily benefit properties near Karren's home. The problem is, most residents are too busy or just don't want the conflict, explained Sofia Rodriguez, a retired teacher. Karren counts on apathy to maintain control. What if you had evidence that the board was operating illegally? I asked, carefully laying out what Terrence had discovered. The room grew quiet as they considered the implications. If we could prove financial impropriety or violations of state HOA laws, we could potentially force an emergency election, Martin said slowly, or even get the state involved. Exactly, I nodded. I'm pursuing this because of how the HOA is affecting my business, but it sounds like all of you have just as much at stake. By the end of the meeting, we had formed an alliance. They would gather additional evidence from inside the HOA while I continued my investigation from the outside. We agreed to meet again in 2 weeks to share findings. As I left the restaurant, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about protecting my business anymore, it was about standing up to a bully who had been abusing her power for years. Little did I know that Karren was about to escalate the conflict beyond anything I had anticipated. The marina was always busiest on holiday weekends, and the upcoming 4th of July was our biggest event of the year. We had a full day planned. A morning fishing tournament, afternoon jet ski races in the designated area beyond the no-wake zone, and evening fireworks launched from our main pier. All necessary permits had been secured months in advance by Arthur, and I had double-checked every detail to ensure we were in complete compliance with city regulations. After the series of complaints and inspections, I wasn't taking any chances. 2 days before the event, I received a call from the city clerk. "Mr. Ramirez, I'm afraid there's a problem with your fireworks permit for July 4th. My stomach sank. What kind of problem? That permit was approved months ago. Yes, it was, she confirmed, sounding apologetic. But we've received a petition from the Harborview Estates, HOA, citing safety concerns due to the proximity of the fireworks to their homes. The fire marshal has decided to revoke the permit pending review. 2 days before the event. I couldn't keep the frustration from my voice. We've already paid the pyrotechnics company. We've been advertising this for months. I understand, Mr. Ramirez, and I'm sorry for the late notice. The petition was only submitted yesterday, and the fire marshal made his decision this morning. After hanging up, I immediately called the fire marshal's office. The secretary informed me that Fire Marshal Williams was unavailable, but that I could appeal the decision, a process that would take a minimum of 2 weeks. Convenient timing. Too convenient. I called Terrence and asked him to look into any connections between Fire Marshal Williams and the Westlakes. Then, I contacted the pyrotechnics company to explain the situation. They were sympathetic, but firm we would still be responsible for 75% of the contract price as a cancellation fee. That evening, I received a text message from Wanda. "Check your email. You need to see this." In my inbox was a forwarded message that had been sent to all Harborview Estates residents. It was from Karren, announcing triumphantly that the HOA had successfully protected our community by stopping the marina's dangerous and disruptive fireworks display. The message encouraged residents to instead attend the HOA's own 4th of July celebration at the community clubhouse. The final paragraph made my blood boil. This is just the first step in our ongoing efforts to address the negative impact of the marina's new ownership on our community. Rest assured that your board is working diligently to protect your property values and quality of life. I was about to call Wanda when Terrence called me. "You're not going to believe this," he said without preamble. "Fire Marshal Williams is Richard Westlake's brother-in-law, and guess who handled his messy divorce last year, pro bono? Richard's law firm." The pieces were falling into place. This wasn't just about noise complaints anymore. This was a coordinated campaign to undermine my business by any means necessary. "There's more," Terrence continued. "I've been following the money trail from those special assessments. A significant portion has been funneled through a shell company called Lakeview Consulting. Guess who owns that company? Karren and Richard Westlake." I sat down heavily in my office chair. "They've been embezzling from the HOA. It looks that way. They've disguised it as consulting fees for community relations and strategic planning, but I can't find any evidence that actual services were provided." This was bigger than I had anticipated. Not just HOA overreach or personal vendetta, but potentially criminal activity. "What should we do with this information?" I asked. "We need more concrete evidence before taking it to authorities," Terrence advised. "Financial records, board meeting minutes showing approval of these payments without proper disclosure of the conflict." "I'll talk to my resistance contacts," I promised. "They might be able to get access to those records." After hanging up, I sat staring at the wall, thinking through my options. The fireworks cancellation was a major blow. It was too late to come up with an alternative that would satisfy our customers who were expecting a spectacular show. Then, an idea struck me. I couldn't have fireworks at the marina, but nothing prevented me from having them on the water. I immediately called the pyrotechnics company back and explained my new plan. For an additional fee, they could launch the fireworks from a barge anchored in the lake, still visible from the marina, but technically outside city jurisdiction. It would cost more, but it would save the event. Next, I called the Coast Guard to ensure this alternative plan would meet their safety requirements. After some discussion and a hastily submitted revised plan, they gave their approval. The 4th of July arrived with perfect weather, clear skies, light breeze, and temperatures in the low 80s. Despite the last-minute changes, our event was a success. The fishing tournament drew a record number of participants, and the jet ski races were wildly popular. As evening approached, word had spread about our alternative fireworks plan. The marina was packed with spectators and boats filled the lake nearby, all waiting for the show. At precisely 9:30 p.m., the first fireworks exploded over the water, drawing gasps and applause from the crowd. From my position on the main dock, I could see the Harborview Estates community across the bay, where their much smaller celebration was taking place. With satisfaction, I noticed people streaming out of the HOA clubhouse toward the shoreline for a better view of our display. Karren's attempt to sabotage our event had backfired spectacularly. As the grand finale lit up the sky, Miguel approached me with a grim expression. "We've got trouble," he said, gesturing toward the marina entrance. "Harbor Patrol and City Police." Sure enough, several official vehicles with flashing lights had pulled up. Karren Westlake stood nearby, pointing animatedly toward the barge where our fireworks were being launched. I made my way through the crowd to meet them, trying to maintain a calm demeanor despite my racing heart. "Mr. Ramirez," the Harbor Patrol officer greeted me, Officer Jenkins, from my jet ski encounter. "We've received complaints about unauthorized fireworks." Before I could respond, Karren pushed forward. "His permit was revoked. He's deliberately violating city ordinances." I addressed Officer Jenkins directly, ignoring Karren. "The city permit was indeed revoked, which is why we're not launching from the marina property. The fireworks are being launched from a barge outside city jurisdiction, with full Coast Guard approval." I pulled out my phone, showing him the email confirmation. The officer reviewed it carefully, then nodded. "This appears to be in order, Miss Westlake. The Coast Guard has jurisdiction over the lake beyond the shoreline." Karren's face contorted with rage. "This is outrageous. He's clearly trying to circumvent city regulations." "Actually," I replied calmly, "I'm complying with all applicable regulations for the location where the fireworks are being launched. Just as you insist that I follow rules that apply to my property, I'm sure you understand the importance of recognizing proper jurisdictional boundaries." Officer Jenkins suppressed what looked suspiciously like a smile. "Unless there's anything else, we'll be on our way." "Enjoy the remainder of your evening, Mr. Ramirez." As the officials left, Karren remained, trembling with anger. "This isn't over, Ramirez. Not by a long shot." "I'm sure it isn't, Miss Westlake," I replied. "But perhaps it's time to ask yourself why you're so determined to harm a local business that's been part of this community for 30 years. You have no idea who you're dealing with," she hissed. "Actually, I think I do," I said quietly. "And I think a lot of your neighbors are starting to figure it out too." I nodded toward the shoreline of Harborview Estates, where dozens of residents were enjoying our fireworks display rather than the HOA's event. Karren's gaze followed mine, and I could almost see the wheels turning in her head as she realized she might be losing her grip on the community. Without another word, she stormed off, pulling out her phone as she went. I had no doubt she was calling Richard to plot their next move. The following week brought an unexpected development. I received a certified letter from Westlake, Brown and Associates, informing me that the Harborview Estates HOA was filing a lawsuit against Harborview Marina for creating a continuous public nuisance and intentional interference with the quiet enjoyment of private property. The letter demanded that I cease all jet ski operations, limit the marina's hours to 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., and pay $250,000 in damages for decreased property values allegedly caused by marina activities. I immediately forwarded the letter to my attorney, Liam McCarthy, who called me within the hour. "This is a nuisance lawsuit," he assured me. "They have very little chance of success given that the marina predates the housing development and operates within all applicable regulations, but defending against it will be costly and time-consuming." "Exactly what they want," I sighed. "They're trying to bleed me dry." "There might be another angle," Liam suggested. "The fact that Richard Westlake's firm is representing the HOA where his wife is president raises serious conflict of interest questions. And if what your investigator found about financial improprieties is true, we could potentially file a countersuit." "Let's do it," I decided. "I'm tired of playing defense." 2 days later, we filed our response to the lawsuit, along with a countersuit alleging harassment, abuse of process, and tortious interference with business relationships. Additionally, we filed a formal complaint with the State Bar Association regarding Richard Westlake's ethical violations in representing the HOA without proper disclosure or consent from all members. The local newspaper picked up the story, running a front-page article about the dispute that portrayed the HOA as bullying a small business. Public sentiment seemed to be shifting in our favor, especially after several Harborview residents were quoted criticizing their own HOA's aggressive tactics. Meanwhile, our resistance group had been busy. Martin Chen had managed to obtain copies of the HOA's financial records through his position on the Architectural Review Committee, which confirmed Terrence's findings about the payments to Lakeview Consulting. Sophia had gathered emails and text messages from other board members discussing ways to force out the marina without proper board votes or membership approval. Armed with this evidence, we took a bold step. We reported Karren and Richard Westlake to the state attorney's office for embezzlement and fraud. The investigation moved quickly. State financial crimes investigators arrived at the Westlake's home early on a Tuesday morning with a search warrant. By afternoon, they had seized computers, financial records, and phones. Richard's law firm issued a statement that he was taking a leave of absence pending the resolution of the matter. The HOA lawsuit against the marina was abruptly withdrawn 3 days later. With the Westlakes under investigation, an emergency meeting of the Harborview Estates homeowners was called. The turnout was unprecedented. Over 90% of households were represented. The atmosphere was tense as residents demanded answers about the allegations of financial misconduct. Patricia Holden, attempting to defend Karren in her absence, was shouted down by angry homeowners. By the end of the evening, the entire board had resigned, and a temporary committee was formed to manage HOA affairs until a proper election could be held. Wanda texted me the results. Westlake regime is officially over. New election in 30 days. The nightmare is ending. A week later, I was working late in my office when I heard a knock at the door. To my surprise, Richard Westlake stood there, looking significantly less polished than the last time I'd seen him. His designer suit had been replaced by khakis and a polo shirt, and the confident bearing was gone. "May I come in?" he asked quietly. Curious, I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "What can I do for you, Mr. Westlake?" He sat down heavily. "I've come to propose a settlement." "I thought you withdrew your lawsuit," I said, confused. "Not for that, for everything." Richard ran a hand through his hair. "The investigation, the countersuit, the bar complaint." I leaned back, studying him. "Those aren't things I can just make go away, Mr. Westlake. They involve state authorities now." "I understand that," he nodded. "But your statements to investigators could significantly influence the outcome. I'm asking if there's some arrangement we could come to that might soften your position. Are you attempting to obstruct justice, Mr. Westlake? Because that would only make your situation worse." "No," he said quickly. "I'm simply trying to resolve this situation in a way that doesn't destroy everything my wife and I have built." I considered him for a moment. "Why did you and Karren want the marina so badly? Enough to try to drive Arthur out of business and then me?" Richard hesitated, then seemed to decide honesty was his best option. "It was never about the marina operation itself. It was about the land. We had plans to develop it into luxury condominiums. The profit potential was enormous, tens of millions. At the expense of a historic business that provides jobs and serves the community," I pointed out. He shrugged. "Business is business, nothing personal." "It felt pretty personal," I replied dryly. Richard leaned forward. "Look, I'll be frank. Karren and I are in serious trouble. The embezzlement charges are the least of our concerns. If this goes to trial, and all the evidence comes out about how we manipulated city officials and misused HOA funds to pursue personal vendettas, we're looking at significant jail time." Again, why should I care? "Because I'm prepared to make restitution. Full restitution to the HOA for all misappropriated funds, plus compensation to you for all the expenses and business disruption we caused." I raised an eyebrow. "That would be a substantial sum." "I'm aware," he nodded grimly. "But it's better than prison." I thought about it for a moment. "I'll discuss it with my attorney. But understand this, I won't lie to investigators or withhold evidence. The best I might do is refrain from pushing for maximum penalties if you make full restitution and issue a public apology." Richard winced at the mention of a public apology but nodded. "I understand. Thank you for hearing me out." After he left, I sat in my office for a long time, thinking about the strange turn of events. When I had purchased the marina, I'd expected challenges, maintenance issues, staffing problems, seasonal fluctuations in business. I never anticipated becoming entangled in a neighborhood power struggle that would ultimately bring down a corrupt HOA president and her lawyer husband. The aftermath unfolded over the next few months. Richard and Karren Westlake reached a plea deal with prosecutors, avoiding jail time in exchange for full restitution to the HOA over $400,000, community service, and 5 years probation. Richard surrendered his law license, and both were barred from serving on any HOA board in the state of Illinois. The new Harborview Estates Board, led by Martin Chen as president and Sofia Rodriguez as vice president, established a much more collaborative relationship with the marina. We formed a joint community committee to address genuine concerns about noise and traffic while respecting the marina's right to operate. As for me, I continued the renovations that Arthur had started, upgrading facilities while preserving the marina's character and accessibility. Business flourished as word spread about our improved amenities and family-friendly atmosphere. On the anniversary of my purchase, I hosted a community celebration at the marina, inviting residents from Harborview Estates and the surrounding neighborhoods. The turnout was tremendous, with families enjoying boat rides, fishing demonstrations, and yes, jet ski rentals. As the sun began to set, I found myself standing on the main dock, watching children laugh as they fed ducks near the shoreline. Wanda Evans approached, handing me a cold drink. "Quite a difference from last year," she observed. I smiled, thinking about how much had changed. It's amazing what can happen when people work together instead of against each other. "Speaking of change," Wanda said, "did you hear the Westlakes are moving? They put their house on the market last week. Can't say I'm surprised. It would be awkward to stay after everything that happened." She nodded in agreement. "The new board is discussing naming the community beach after you, by the way. Ramirez Shore or something like that. To commemorate the battle that finally freed us from Karren's reign of terror," I laughed. "That's really not necessary. I was just protecting my business." "It was more than that," Wanda insisted. "You stood up to bullies when most people would have either given in or responded with equal nastiness. You showed there's a better way." As we watched the first stars appear over Lake Michigan, I reflected on the unexpected journey of the past year. When I had purchased Harborview Marina, I'd been focused on the business opportunity, the potential for growth and profit in a prime location. What I hadn't anticipated was becoming part of a community, with all the complications and rewards that entailed. I hadn't expected to find myself in the middle of a neighborhood civil war, or to play a role in exposing corruption and abuse of power. But standing there, looking out over the peaceful marina as families enjoyed the simple pleasure of a summer evening by the water, I knew I wouldn't have had it any other way. Sometimes the most valuable things we gain aren't listed in the assets column of a business acquisition. And sometimes, when a Karren calls the harbor patrol on your jet ski, it's just the beginning of a much bigger story.